So after my previous FM26 guides, I had a few people requesting that I make a guide on youth development. Of course, always happy to provide it. So here we go, but with a very quick caveat in that most of the things, I say most of the things, some of the things we need in the game to make youth development work properly haven't yet been implemented in FM26. So we're going to do it with a little bit of a basics. We're going to do the basics of youth development for beginners and advanced. And then as soon as we get access to things like training, we will do a more in-depth version, or a part two, I should say. So for this, we are starting with Manchester United, just because they've got a fairly good youth team. The first thing I recommend doing when you're doing any kind of youth development save, whether you're starting that way or you've realised you need to do it at the last minute, is to take a look at your first team squad. Now, with your first team squad, what you want to do is get some idea of how you're going to play first. So I've got this set up to play as a 4-2-3-1. Just to make life a bit simple. And all you want to do is just see what you've got already in those positions. Now, you can just do it visually if it helps, or you can put them in your team as sort of a 1 to 11 followed by their backups. But just have a look at what we've got here. So we've got a striker and 2 backups, a goalkeeper and 2 backups. I always recommend when doing youth development that one of your backups, one of your actual first backup, your primary backup, should be someone who's under 21. So Radek, Vitek here would fit the bill. We then can see we've got 4 centre-halves in Yoro, Ligt, Maguire and Martinez, who is injured. I would have 3 for each position. At a big club, at a small club, have your starter, have your youth player. Lerny Yoro is a very good youth player to have in there, but to make this work, we are going to need to get a couple of better youth players from down here. I know they've got Aiden, so we'll move him up to the first team squad. And there was someone else who I have lost now because I was looking through this before I did this. So yeah, Jayden and Ngawashi. We're going to move those up to the senior squad just for now, just so I can show you what I mean. So, as you can see here, we've got what will be our starting centre-halves in Ligt and Martinez. And then if we're playing a mid-table side, I would put in Maguire and Yoro. And then I might consider swapping in one of Ngawashi or indeed Aiden to be that full replacement in there if we were playing a small team. But it doesn't quite go that simple. As much as you will hear a lot of people doing youth guides say, just give those young players as much game time as possible, it does come with a few caveats. So if they have got a 2-star current ability, one of the very few things current ability is good for on the game at a glance, I would keep this guy on the bench most games, and I'd bring him on when we were winning. Or I would play him in those games that are easy wins, cup ties against 4th tier teams or whatever comes up. That will be when he would start. But otherwise, I would keep him on the bench at all times just so I've got him to bring on when I need backup. A guy like Jayden Ngawashi, because he's 16, I would keep him in our under 18s until he turns 18. Never loan out an under 17-year-old, even when you've got the option to, unless the place they're going has better training facilities and youth facilities than you do, in which case go for it. But for now, we'll just do this kind of as a brief guide just to keep things simple, because Lerny Yoro is going to play quite a lot because he's Lerny Yoro. But then Aiden, like I said, would get a lot of game time off the bench. Even if it meant dropping Maguire from the bench, I would have Heaven there before Maguire because he's got some growth he can do just to get him in there. But that does mean, of course, that if we go into our under-21 squad, what you'll find is I've got a lot of centre-halves I'm not using. Now, generally speaking, I would look at potential first. Anyone with 5-star potential who's in the under-21s and is over 18, I would bring into the first team. I would probably bring in a couple of guys who have 4-star as well, so I'll bring these guys up just to show you what I mean. And then the other idea would be mentored as well as to play. But we'll get back into that in a second once we've got these guys brought up, because that will also feed into our long-term planning. So all these guys here with that little 4-star-ish potential, they're going to come up to the first team for now and leave us just the 3-stars. Now, these guys who have got 3-star potential ability, I would sell them. All of them. I would sell all of them. If you have to loan them out to get someone to buy them, do that. But I would sell every single one of these players because they really aren't going to grow to be good enough for your first team. They might get you some money, like Toby Collier here. We can see if we click on Toby Collier, he's worth 15 million quid. If you can get 15 million quid for him now, do it. But realistically, either loan them out for a year, let them play well, then sell them, get their value up, or if they've got a year on their contract, you're not going to offer them another one, just sell them now, would be the best way to handle that. That way you're freeing up resources in your training, your coaching for that. And then as under 18s graduate, do the same process with them. Now, back to the first team to talk about how we do the in-house development a little bit, because as I said, I like the rule of threes with a big club, rule of twos with a small club, with the younger player being the absolute backup of that level. But we have a look now through what we've got here, and we can see at a glance here we've got Amos, Leon, Shaw and Malasia, who are capable right backs. Obviously, I don't need 4 right backs. In fact, we've got Dorgu as well, who is a capable left back to go in there as well. I would probably be inclined to sell Malasia and Shaw. I would let Dorgu be our main left back and then rotate Amas in and possibly Leon because he's on an ESC contract. Or just sell Luke Shaw, loan out Leon, and then use Dorgu, Amas, and Malasia as your starting left backs would be the way to go. And you do that throughout the team. So one problem you've got at Manchester United is if we look at players who are primarily attacking midfielders, you've of course got Bruno, you've got Mason Mount, you've got James Scanlon, who's good in the youth team, you've got Sam Mather, who is good in the under-21s, you also got Matthias Cunha. You don't need 5, you've only got one position. 5 into 1 doesn't go. I would recommend in this situation, I would probably sell Mason Mount. He will be the first one to go just because I want to free up room to kind of have that progression upwards. And I'd actually be half tempted to send out at least one of these on loan. I would probably send out Shea Lacey and Sam Mather on loan, have Scanlon rotating in. But whichever one you keep, just make sure they are, again, getting that game time off the bench in matches where you are winning. Again, with wingers, we've got 3 here in Sancho, Garnacho and Rashford. Sancho is now too old to be already used developing, so he would be your backup, and I would have Garnacho as the guy rotating in for Rashford. Again, if we look to the right-hand side, we've got Lacey there, we've got Anthony there. We had Amad Diallo there as well, who's already quite young. Again, I would have that prioritised as your first choice, who would be Anthony, your second choice, who would be Diallo, your third choice, who would be Shea Lacey to come in. But again, anyone who is already over 18 with a 1.5 star ability or below, loan them out. Just try and loan them out unless you've got no other young players with a depth option as well. That's always a good piece of advice. Just make sure anyone who is a young player with a 1.5 star current ability, just loan them out. 2 stars, they're good enough to come into the team and do a job. They're not good enough to start for you every week, but they're good enough to come into the team and do a job. 1.5, they are good enough to be loaned out already and see how they progress. If someone gets to the age of 21, 22, I think there's anyone in the United squad who's got to 21, 22. Well, Vitek might be an example, actually. He's got to 21. He's only got 2-star ability. I would sell him and replace him with someone else younger. But I will say that with the caveat that goalkeepers do develop a bit later. So you could maybe keep him around till the last year of his contract just to see if he has had any growth. So that's just how you develop players from within your team. Like I said, because there's no real access to training at the moment for younger players, there's no way to get into youth team training. Or there is, I found it briefly and then I can't find it again. I don't know if it got taken out or if it's just buggy. Either way, it's not a solid system to use. So we are going to have a look at that once that finally gets implemented. The other thing to look at as well, obviously, whilst looking at developing young players, is that you need to be aware of the facilities you have at your club, which are important. And it's not on that screen anymore. It's on the About Club page, I think. Club profile. Let's go club profile. Nope. Cannot get used to this at all. Let's go for the club site and start from there. So, yeah, it's in youth setup. I knew it was around there, so I know I'd seen it. So, you've got 4-star youth coaching, 4-star youth facilities. When a player gets a loan offer for you, that's a player you've got that 4-star and above potential for you want to get into your first team. Check the other team's ratings here, because if they're not playing at a level higher than your coaches say they're good enough for. So if you go into your players and click on the star ratings, or it used to be click on the star ratings, it's not anymore, of course, because that would be too easy. You have to go into there, then click on the star ratings, bring up their coach report. So it says here, good championship player. If I got an offer from a Premier League club to loan him and they said they were going to start him, I wouldn't care too much about their training facilities. If he was going as a backup, I would look at their youth facilities and I would see if they have got youth facilities that are better than mine, so he's training at a higher level whilst he's not playing for me. And as I said, I would go through every young player in the club and do that. The other thing, of course, to look at is going to be our youth intake. And again, it's very important to make sure these players are playing. So the other thing as well you might want to do at a new club is to go through your staff and specifically have a look through any under 18 coaching staff you've got lying around, which I can never find because it's so broken. I've not looked into it properly with the youth staff, but I'm sure you'll find it with a little bit of a play around. But find your youth staff, and when you find your youth staff, is it under 18s? Is it in there? I can't remember. When you find your staff, which you will find eventually, go into your staff and have a little look at what's there and make sure you've got the best possible youth staff that you can get, starting with a very, very good head of youth development, always a key role, which is in here. So we can see here Stephen Torpey, who used to play for Torquay, I think. Does it have anything here for him? I used to play for Liverpool. Anyway, irrelevant. He used to be a player. But we can see he's a decent-ish head of youth development as far as I can tell with the new scale. This is your key guy to make sure he's good, and then make sure you give him the power to recruit those staff if you don't want to, essentially. Right, one more thing to talk through before we go into youth development properly, or before we finish talking about youth development, because it is about just getting those players to start off game time with you and to a start and below game time somewhere else whilst they're over 18, and making sure you trim the fat. That's all big things to do. I'm just going to load up a save where I know I've got a youth intake prepped, and we will talk about signing players from a youth intake. Okay, so frustratingly, I deleted the save where I had the youth intake prepped, and I'd completely forgotten I'd done it. So, with a youth intake, make sure when they come through, and you can always see when they're about to come through by going into your youth setup and clicking on your youth candidates, and when they come through, they'll be listed here. I recommend only ever sign the ones who have 4 or 5 star potential and bin off the rest. They are just a waste of your time. They don't add anything tangible in terms of value, bar maybe you can sell them for a bit of cash down the line. But 9 times out of 10, anyone 3 star and below, you'll probably end up just releasing at the end of their contract anyway. The other thing as well to look at with young players is we'll go to the under 18s. Why not? Got to be careful how you say these days. I just have a look at some of these players. So once you've got players you identified that might be good enough for the future, let's have a look at Bendito, Mantato. We want to have a look at a couple of their stats as well, just to be on the safe side. So I recommend always making sure the determination is 15 and above. That will always be a key determinant of how well they develop. You can develop players with lower potential, but it's honestly a slog. You'll be playing every week to make that happen. If you've got no choice, play the guy. But I tend to reserve my youth development efforts just for the people who have good determination. The other thing to look at is personality. Anything that says says the words determined, professional, model citizen in any way, shape, or form. Don't be phased by unambitious players either. It's not a good thing at the top level, but at lower levels, it probably means that player might still develop if their determination is good, but they're not going to be begging you to leave. So it might stay with you for a while, but it does have that kind of backlash that when you get into, say, a cup final, they don't care whether you win it or not. So just kind of keep an eye on those personalities. But yeah, make sure you're always checking the determination of those young players you bring up. So if we look at those guys we just brought into our first team, for example, Jayden Ngawashi, despite having a 4, potentially 5 potential ability, only has 8 for determination, which we could still fix with some mentoring, but it would have to be good mentoring. And he only has a balanced personality, so you really are 50-50, maybe slightly under 50-50 with that determination, whether or not he will develop at all as a footballer. Whereas if we look at Aiden Heaven, bad determination, bad personality. Some of these I've seen develop, so that might go with some mentoring again. But I'd be inclined to keep an eye on his potential ability, and if it starts dropping, maybe I would consider selling him on while he's still worth some money. Lerny Yoro, he's got good determination. He's the kind of guy I'm looking for. So spirited under the hood just means that he's got a sort of happy-go-lucky personality, but he's also got the determination to work with it. So he is going to be a player you probably want to be keeping around. But like I said, there's a very brief guide to youth development because we don't have access to the training. We don't have access to managing the youth squads either, which is another part I would normally put in there. So I guess we'll wrap things up there. I will do a part 2, but those are the real basics of developing young players. I would recommend setting a note either on your phone or if it's still available in the calendar. I don't know if it's still a thing you can do on the calendar anymore. It probably isn't. It's probably another useful thing they've taken out. But if you can set a reminder for yourself to check every sort of 6 months, so the beginning of every June and the beginning of every January would usually be when I would do it. just to have a checkup, see where these guys are at, because this potential where it's got a white star in it will adjust over time as to where the layers, the level is. Also bear in mind that if you were to sign, say, a Neymar for this club, potentially that 5-star becomes a 4-star. So it's all relative to your best player and the best player in the league. So for example, this potentially is probably based on Erling Haaland overall as the best player in the league. Just keep that in mind. But yeah, just a very simple early guide. As I said, once we get access to the facilities, assuming we do, I will do a second part of this. I just wanted to give you guys that brief youth guide because you've been asking for it. Do ask me questions down below. I know I've breezed through this, so if there's anything specific you'd like to know, please do ask in the comments below. If you're not subscribed already, please do that. There's a thing down below. Hit the bell as well, and it will tell you whenever I bring anything out. There's fun stuff on the channel as well as guides. Until next time, thank you for watching. I've been Chasing Lerny. I'll see you all very soon. Have a good one.